This is Kim Hammer with your devotion taken from 1 Samuel chapter 23, beginning with verse 15. We find that Saul continues to pursue David, and in the midst of the pursuit that we're reading about in this chapter, Jonathan finds a way to slip away and come to David. And when he comes to David, he comes with one specific goal in mind, and it's shared in these verses. Jonathan helped David find strength in God. That's a friend that Jonathan was to David. Jonathan's dad, Saul, was in pursuit of David, and yet he was willing to risk everything to come to David, who he had fallen in love with as a brother, and he wanted to protect him, but he also wanted to give him strength. And so he comes to David in the midst of the pursuit, and he says, I'm here so as to remind you that God is going to give you the strength you need. How did he give him strength, or how did he remind him of the strength that God was going to give him? Well, you find that as you read in chapter 46, verse 1 of the book of Psalm, it must have made an impression upon David, because David wrote in the 46th Psalm, verse 1, he said, God is our strength and our refuge and ever-present help in trouble. I have no doubt in my mind that he remembered that time that Jonathan came to him earlier in these verses that we're looking at today, and Jonathan said to him, I've come here to help you find strength in God. Now, why did he do that? Because Jonathan himself, in the same passage of Scripture, acknowledges that David was going to be king. And Jonathan was very happy to accept, and he acknowledged the fact that I will be second in command. He knew his place. And when he knew his place, he was happy in his place. That was the problem with Saul. Saul knew his place, but he wasn't happy in it because he knew that David was going to be moved up to be king, and he couldn't handle that. That's why he was pursuing him, trying to kill him, because he was going against God's will. And sometimes in life you run into people that they know their place, they just don't want to expect their place, and they can make it miserable for everybody else around you. But here in the midst of all this comes Jonathan, the son of Saul, and he comes to the aid of David, not necessarily to give him physical support, but he gave him spiritual support by reminding him that God would not let his dad lay a hand on him. In fact, the Bible tells us, when you go over to the book of Isaiah, chapter 41 and verse 10, it says, So do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my right hand of righteousness. These are the things that Jonathan wanted David to know, because David was just like anybody else. He got tired in the battle. He got down in the battle. He might have even got depressed in the battle. But the one thing that Jonathan wanted to do at this time wasn't necessarily to bring him physical reinforcements, but he was going to bring him spiritual reinforcements by reminding him that God is his strength, and God will protect him, and no one will lay a hand on him. And with this, David found the strength to continue to fight on. Jonathan and David made a covenant that day. It wasn't the first time they had made a covenant. When you go back to chapter 18 and verse 3, when Jonathan realized that David was appointed to be the king to replace Saul, he accepted that as fact and accepted it as God's will, and he made a covenant with him. And here they renewed that covenant. Jonathan truly was a great friend. We all like to have friends. In fact, we sometimes go out and try to make all the friends we can. But it's not about the number of friends that you have. It's about the quality of the friends you have. Jonathan was a quality friend because he came to David for the purpose of helping David find strength in God. Maybe our goal for the day is to be that one good friend that goes and helps to give somebody the strength of God that they need. And maybe later in life, like David did in the book of Psalm chapter 46 and verse 1, he said, God is our strength and our refuge and ever-present help in trouble. Maybe what we do today for one of our friends will help them later to remember and to write something down that can be shared with somebody else to be an encouragement.